This is FE Peer Review. The date is April the 2nd, 2025. Bobby Shafto's video shows drop with distance. In an earlier video on this observation by Bobby Shafto, I looked at the various landmarks around the water here, a couple of lighthouses, a house in the far distance, and established a mark 17 feet up from the water line on each of these objects. This was something Bobby had requested people to do. I didn't give the ship itself adequate attention, and in this video I just want to focus on the ship. What we're going to do here is we're going to figure out exactly where on the hull of this ship, measuring up from the water line, we're going to go up 17 feet, and we're going to pretend that we're painting a horizontal green stripe along the side of that ship 17 feet above the water. That's going to be a reference for us because we are standing with our view, the camera, at 17 feet above the water. So if the water is a flat surface, that 17-foot green stripe should be right at our eye level, horizontally aligned with where we are standing looking through the camera. So that's the goal of this video. And when we've done that, then I'm going to do a second part, which is going to be a little reference back to perspective drawing, which I touched on also, and what is not quite accurate in conventional perspective drawing. And we're going to compare that to what we see in reality. So starting with this image, these are the steps that I took. You'll see that I created a little, using red lines, I basically created 3 red rulers, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. The first one I did was the full height of the letter T here. You may recall in my previous video I said that that letter appeared to be between 19 and 20 feet. As I was making this video, it occurred to me that 6 meters is 19.6 feet, thereabouts. And the letter was probably painted based on the metric system as probably a 6-meter tall letter. So I went with 19.6 feet for the height of the letter. And that would be this top vertical red line. And then counting pixels, I made, using that as my ruler, I made a second red line that was 17 feet long. And that's this one on the right here. I placed the bottom of that red line at the water line. And the top of the red line is just a little bit above the bottom of the letter. And then I decided it would be useful to know the distance from the bottom of the letter to the water line as well. And that would be this line on the left here, this vertical line on the left. So at 120 pixels for that 19.6 line, I got 17 feet and drew 104 pixels. And then measured from the bottom of the letter down to the water and came up with 16.3 feet from the bottom of the letter to the water line. Now that I have this information about the height of the letter and the 17-foot line, I can apply that to the distant image. All right, so I've zoomed in here so we can see it a little better. And I took those rulers and I dropped them into this image, and I scaled them so that the top ruler, the one that measures the height of the letters, aligns with the letters that we see here. There we have the top ruler. And we know that that is 19.6 feet or 6 meters high. So I made a note of that. And I counted the pixels, 22 pixels. And then based on that pixel count, I determined a line 17 feet high. That would be the vertical line on the right. And that came out to 19 pixels. And then finally, as you recall, we had 16.3 feet from the bottom of the letter to the water line. So again, using my 22 pixel 19.6 foot ruler, I created another ruler of the appropriate length. Let me zoom in one more time. That would be this left vertical line from the bottom of the letter down to the bottom of the 17-foot alignment. And as you can see, that is below the water line. And that is 16.3 feet. 16.3 feet, as we saw when the ship was closer. With that 16.3 foot line, available to us now, I could divide that into two parts, the part that's above the water and the part that's below. And again, count pixels and find out how much of this is below the water. I came up with 9.4 feet is below the water line, as we see it in this image. Now what we're seeing is obstruction because the ship has not risen as it's gotten closer to us. It's still got the same draft that it had at this point in the image. So what we're seeing is the gap below between the bottom of the letter and the water line changing as the ship gets closer to us. Anyway, those are all the figures, and we've got our 17-foot reference now. So I can turn on my reference lines, paint my green stripe. As you can see, the green stripe here aligns with the top of the 17-foot ruler. That's 17 feet up the side of the ship, measured from the water line. The real water line, not the part that's hidden here. And we'll go back to the closer image as well. Here we see our green stripe painted on the side of the hull of the closer image. And we see that that green line aligns with the 17-foot ruler. Now I've got the closer image on top and the more distant image underneath, and we can see the two green lines. I'm going to play with the transparency of this top layer a little bit so that we can see both of them at the same time. So I'm going to adjust the opacity here. You can see the distant ship showing up here on the left. That's a good point right there. So we've got the letters of the closer ship on the right, and we can see the letters on the further ship on the left here. We see the horizontal green, the long horizontal green line aligning on the closer ship, and the shorter green line on the more distant ship. And what we see very clearly is that although both those green lines, that green stripe that's on that ship, although they're both 17 feet above the water line, because it's still the same ship with the same draft, they don't align with each other and with our eye level. When we started this out, it was us standing at 17 feet above the water, looking straight out at the side of the ship, at a line that was painted on the side of the ship that was also 17 feet above the water. So it should, if the water's flat, it should be right at our eye level. And if the water's flat, no matter how far away that ship goes, that green line is 17 feet above the flat water at our eye level. Well, that's not what we see in reality. Here's two photographs demonstrating that. What we see is that when the ship is further away, that green stripe is very low in the image. And as the ship gets closer to us, it gradually rises up higher and higher, closer to our eye level. Now, if we were looking at this image through a surveyor's level, looking at the crosshairs in the level, we'd see that even in the closer position, the 17-foot mark is slightly below the horizontal crosshair in the level. We don't have that image. Bobby's using cameras, not surveying equipment, which is fine. But I think that this pretty conclusively shows that the green line, the horizontal stripe at the 17-foot mark on this ship, is dropping relative to our eye level as the ship is further away from us. Now, one reason for that drop could be that our reference surface, the water from which we measured the 17 feet, is not a flat surface. It could be that our reference surface is dropping away. In other words, the water's not flat. That's the solution we Globies propose, and using that solution, we can with remarkable accuracy predict exactly how that green line is going to change in our view. If this were out in the open ocean and that ship could get even further out, we'd see that as it gets further away, the green line drops below the horizon. And then eventually the ship itself drops below the horizon, and we can pinpoint that precisely based on curvature. If flat earthers have some other solution, that is equally quantifiable and predictable and accurate, they're welcome to present it. If you've got that solution, I'd love a comment from you. However, I want to say that just saying stuff in comments isn't enough. Demonstrate it in a video, show the math involved, show the measurements involved, and apply it to predict. That would be useful. If you can't do that, you really aren't trying, you know. Speaking of not trying, I've been following this discussion for about 5 years now, and I know it went on years before that, many years before that on YouTube before I stumbled onto it. I have yet to see a flat earther even try to produce an accurate two-dimensional flat earth map. It seems to me that that is basic. You know, if you're going to claim the earth is flat and you don't have a map, you don't have anything. So I don't want to change the subject here, but I do like to point that out. It's time to see the map. Now let's move on and look a little bit at conventional perspective drawing. In one of my recent videos, I talked about perspective as we learn to draw when we're young and we're taught to draw perspective, and how that isn't quite exactly what we see in the world around us. I wanted to expand on that point just a little bit. I found this nice little book on archive.org that has some useful images. There'll be a link in the description, of course. So the conventions we learn are that we place the horizon at our eye level. The horizon in the image represents our eye level. Horizontal lines above the horizon drop to the horizon, but don't drop below it. Horizontal lines below the horizon rise to the horizon, but they don't go above it. Everything converges at the horizon. Things above stay above, things below stay below. And then if we look at the three figures over here, things that are at our eye level, in other words, the heads of these three people, align with the horizon. When we see an image like this, we understand that these three people are standing on the same surface that we're standing on, and that we're all pretty much the same height. One last convention I'll just mention in passing is that we draw vertical lines parallel to each other, whereas in reality vertical lines also converge. But that makes the drawing of a perspective so difficult that it's not usually done. I'm going to show you an example of one, but it's not something we usually do. And we've all become so accustomed to seeing pictures like this that in our minds we don't see this as being in any way inaccurate. We just take it for granted that it's correct. In reality, it is slightly inaccurate. The conventions of perspective drawing are such that it makes the drawing easier, but that's at the price of a little bit of accuracy. This is a three-point perspective. This is a drawing in which the vertical lines are also converging, and as you can see, they converge at a point below the image, and that's because we're above looking down. It's really quite cool, and it's really fun to try to draw three-point perspectives, but they're difficult and time-consuming, and so they're not often used. This page shows figures in the landscape, and this is going to align pretty much with what we're looking at on Bobby Shafto's image. Take the upper left image. The people standing here, their heads are pretty near the horizon. So we're on a beach with them. We're pretty much standing all at the same level. We're maybe up very slightly because we're standing up a little bit higher on the beach, so we see that this guy's head and this woman's head are slightly below the horizon. But basically we're all standing there on the beach together. Take the image on the right, on the other hand, with the figures down here and the horizon up there, and suddenly we're quite high up looking down on the scene. Figure 26 here gives us an interesting example. We've got two figures, and they're the same two figures in both images. By the same, I mean like the guy in front is drawn on the sheet of paper some specific size, and he's drawn the same size in the picture on the right. Same for the guy who's standing in the back. On the piece of paper, if I got a ruler out and measured that on the piece of paper, these are both the same size. But because of the way they're arranged in the two pictures relative to the horizon, the picture on the right makes the guy in the back look much taller than the guy in the front. because of the way their heads align or don't align with the horizon. Figure 23 here, we see that all of the heads align with the horizon, and when we look at that, we understand ourselves to be standing on a flat surface with a bunch of other people who are all about the same height as ourselves. Figure 24 below it, on the other hand, the figures, we are now crouched down, and the figures are taller than us or higher than us, we being in a crouched position. We see this person up above, and we're crouched down at the level of his belt. Same with this guy over here. Note that he has a child with him, and we understand in our minds that these two figures are side by side, so we understand that this one being small is because it is small and it's a child relative to this person over here. So again, that has to do with things at eye level align, and that's the key point here. Things at eye level align. Now let's go back to Bobby's image. What we did when we created this image was basically we're standing with our eye level 17 feet above the water surface. So we went up to that boat with our green paintbrush and we painted a horizontal green stripe along the hull of that ship 17 feet above the water surface, which is the same height that we measured ourselves above the water surface. The long green line is the stripe that we painted on the hull of the ship here for the closer ship, the one on the right. And then when the ship was further away, we see that same green line painted on the hull of the ship. And note that it is below this long line. The ship further away, the green line, which is at our eye level, has dropped. But what we see in the convention is that things that are at our eye level stay in the same alignment horizontally in the frame. They don't drop below it. They don't rise above it. They're all the same. This is reality. This isn't a perspective drawing convention. This is a photograph that's a pretty tight representation of reality, as good as you're going to get from a camera. And what we see is that things that should be at our eye level are dropping as they get further away from us. We measured it 17 feet up from the water, just as we're 17 feet up from the water. So if it's dropping, then the reference surface, the water that we measured from, is also dropping. And that's the problem flat earthers have to face with an image like this. They need to be able to provide a demonstrable, quantifiable, predictive approach to explain this image and allow us to predict how much it's going to drop the further away it gets. Why is it dropping? And how can we quantify that and use it to predict? Globe earthers have that approach using the drop equation 8 inches per mile squared, which is a good approximation, works for hundreds of miles, and we can use that to calculate and check, and it works. So flat earthers need to provide something as rigorous with predictive power. I've never seen such a thing presented. So if you're a flat earther watching this, please do explain why things that should appear at eye level drop. Comments are great, but if you can actually make a video with pictures, that's also very helpful. Usually more helpful than just words. Speaking of comments, I hope you all enjoyed this video and will leave a comment. If you did enjoy it, also give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Thank you. Bye-bye.